All right, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Zander from Melbourne Beach PD in Florida, 26 years in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Zander.
Thank you very much. You make me sound old.
I was gonna ask, I'm like, how quickly did those 26 years fly by? Because I've been having some moments myself where I'm looking back on life and I'm like, I never thought I would be as old as I am today. And here we
Tell
are.
me about it. Tell me about it. I only feel it when I get up out of bed in the morning. Other than that, I'm just fine.
I was walking up the stairs the other day and it didn't hurt, but my knee was definitely like making some weird like noise, like kind of like
Yeah.
it's like, ooh,
It's called
yep,
old age. Yeah.
feel it,
After
yeah.
40. 40, it gets worse, and 50, it really sank in. So, it is what it is.
I had a grandpa say that the older you get, the closer to bed injuries are, and I felt
Yeah.
that. Like how many of us have woken up and like we're like our necks are kinked,
Yeah.
like there's
Like,
you
what happened? I
slept
was just
funny.
sleeping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 And I remember
Absolutely.
I remember him saying that when I was younger and I was like, yeah, yeah, whatever. And now as I get older, I'm like, it's so true. Like there is
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
wisdom in his words.
Right. Absolutely. And it's funny, in 26 years is a long time. It's funny because you just think back and you're like, a lot of it just seems like it was yesterday. It seems like it was a year ago or 2 years ago. And then I'm like, wait a minute, that was 2010. That was 15 years ago. Oh my goodness, where did time go?
Yeah.
So it flies. It does fly.
I try to be really bad at math for that exact
You're
reason
right.
because I'm like, I don't want to do the math. I don't want to know if
Right.
that was 10 or 15
Yeah.
years ago because that's
Exactly.
crazy. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I think that we had a lot in common with kind of our mindset and the importance of wellness. And so I do want to kind of dive in a little bit because I know you came from a larger organization. You retired there, and now you're chief of police at Melbourne Beach PD. But previous to where you are now, you had experience of wellness and kind of working under a chief who prioritized wellness and kind of got your buy-in of, why this is important. So I wanted to, maybe share a little bit of that background with our
Okay.
listeners, kind of where you came from and
Yeah.
why wellness is so important to you today.
Yeah, it was I came up through, I want to say old school. I started in 2000. Um, and the mentality back then, and before that I had military, so I was 4 years in the military, and even then wellness wasn't even a thing back then. It really wasn't. It was just like everyone says, you suck it up and move on. That was just what it was. At that time, if anybody said, I think I need to talk to somebody, or that really affected me or something like that, that person was outcasted and you moved on and you got somebody, and it was just the way it was. And I would say about 2010 is when wellness really began to start to creep into the law enforcement field. I came up through an agency. It was a lot bigger than the one I'm at now, so I had a lot of opportunities in that agency, and I was able to learn, do all kinds of neat stuff, I'll say. But it made me the person and the chief I am today because of that. Well, I was in that agency. I had a chief at that time, towards the end of my career in that agency. I had a chief that was going through some. Well, first of all, let me say this: during my path of that previous agency, I probably had three or four people that have committed suicide, to include a previous chief. So I had an officer that directly worked for me on midnights that committed suicide. I had a fantastic, probably the best leader I've ever known in my life. He was my very first corporal when I was assigned to his shift in patrol, just out of training. Such a great leader, such a great personality. He was the type of leader where he would he would be teaching you, and you really didn't have an idea that he was teaching you, but you were learning so much stuff. Probably my biggest role model. And then he hurt his back, went up to the comm center to go work comm center for his final parts of his career. And then he ended up committing suicide. So I've had quite a few over my career. I was thinking back about that, and I was trying to count. And when the number got to five, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's crazy. And you don't ever think of that until you start to put it on your fingers and count. So anyway, fast forward, I was towards the end of my career in Palm Bay. I had a chief at that time that was going through a traumatic experience in his life. And he was the one that started to bring the mental wellness program to that agency. And I got to be honest, I mean, and that was, 2022, 21, something around that time frame. And mental wellness was out there, but there still was a lot of naysayers. And I got to admit, I probably wasn't bought in 110% at that time. But being a part of command staff, I was, yes, sir, whatever you need, we'll do, blah, 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 blah. Um, and when he started to bring the mental wellness program in, the counseling part of it, the gym part of it, the nutrition part of it, I mean, all these different things, the preventive maintenance part of it, I still wasn't 100% on board. And I didn't personally have an event where it affected me to where I can say, I'm a person that has used this, and so I can preach to you and tell you that it's great, and that you need to have this type of preventive maintenance. And then if you do have issues, it's good to talk it out. I didn't have that experience. Well,
Mm.
he did, and he was able to kind of give us his story about how he was able to use it. And then I began to buy in a little bit as time went on. But the 100% buy-in, when I realized that it really can help, is so we were able to get money assigned to our program that we were all developing, and it was out of our budget, and we were able to pay for counseling and all kinds of different things in that budget. And I forget what the budget was the first year, $20,000 or something along that line. I can't remember exactly. Um, and I remember within about 4 months of us starting this program, the money was gone pretty much. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So that you have tons of officers out there. You have people that work for you, work with you, work above you, but you never really know what they're going through. You never really know what they're going through. And it was amazing to me that we had gone through that budget so fast. And I think that's when it really opened my eyes to say, this is something that we definitely need to do for our people, because it's definitely needed. They're not going to come running up asking for it. We got to be able to supply it, and offer as much assistance as we possibly can for whatever they may need. There's so many things going on in police officers' lives, whether if it's the job, seeing the traumatic. I heard the other day someone was saying that the typical person will go through 2 to 4 traumatic experiences in their lifetime. A typical officer will go through, 15 of them through it. I mean, depending on how busy you are, an entire year, right? So it just adds up. And over your career, next thing you know, you've gone through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And then aside from that, the family life, the marriage counseling, the kids, money problems, all that gets added in to all these issues and these problems that people don't think that they need, or they don't even see it that they have it at that time. So I think that was the point where I said, okay, there definitely is something here. And how do we provide something to our people to get them to partake in it, so that we can make them as mentally healthy as we possibly can? And that's kind of where I started to buy in.
You bring up a really interesting point, and I kind of want to dive into this a little bit if you're okay with it. But you said people aren't just going to run up asking for things. And you also said that maybe you had a little bit of buy-in because you heard the story of the other chief and you're like, okay, like I understand, I can, maybe empathize with this. But maybe at that time the belief system was a little bit limited of like, well, I don't know if people are going to use this. So like, and then you put it out there and you're like, whoa, okay, people are needing this, they are using it. And so I think it's a
Yeah.
testament to one, like, like you said, you never know what people are going to go through. And maybe we have thought processes thinking that people won't use things, and then we're pleasantly surprised when they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's this conversation about, and I've heard this time and time again where it's like, okay, well, we got to get buy-in first, or, we're going to ask people if they want it. And if they say yes, they want it, then we're going to put these things out there. But then there's also this conversation of, well, people might not say that they want it or might not even know that they want it until it's out there. And so what is your opinion on this? Is it something where you have to get buy-in first, or is it provide the resources and then people will follow? What do you think has been the most, successful or effective in your eyes?
It's hard to get buy-in unless you have word of mouth. So if you have someone else that's used it, and that's anything in life,
Yeah.
if a person has a nice pair of shoes and they say these are the best comfortable shoes I've ever had in my life, you may even go out and buy that pair of shoes. If no one's ever said that they've used those shoes, you probably won't ever buy those shoes. So, you have to have word of mouth. And I think if you're relying on the success or the stories of other people that they're going through to share their stories with people. And I think that's the big thing. And getting those people to open up and know that it's not shameful, it's not embarrassing, it's not a knock on your manhood or your womanhood or whatever the case may be. It's just a part of life. A person's not made to be able to deal and handle with all the stresses that we have every day. And we do deal with so many of them that it's just not healthy sometimes. And there has to be ways for us to have that vent, to be able to have that maintenance, to stay healthy. And I think it's those stories that really help sell the whole thing overall, because you can't just push it on somebody; they're not going to want it. The big thing that I'm doing now is I'm having our provider is coming to our PD, so they come all the time, and they'll stop by. They'll bring donuts and coffee on our training days when we have a lot of our people here, just so that they see their face, and they'll just have casual conversations, and then it's a little bit easier for them to maybe pull that person aside one day and say, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? And then they're right there, they already have that relationship. I think that's huge as well. But it's something where I think you have to have buy-in, you have to have success stories, and people have to be willing to share them and not be embarrassed or afraid of repercussions or things like that. I don't know if that answers it, but that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Well, what I think it answered for me is that you weren't afraid to try it, to then build the buy-in and the trust and the word of mouth over time, because there's no way you're going to get word of mouth if you don't have it, right? And
Yeah.
so
No, yeah, true.
you as an organization were like, hey, we're going to try it. We're going to see, and we're going to see if we can build that trust. We're going to see if we can build that word of mouth. And you weren't afraid to at least start somewhere.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then if something like that doesn't work and we, don't get the buy-in, we don't get the word of mouth, then, maybe you try something else or you pivot. But it sounds to me like you were like, you know what? We know that it's something that's needed.
No doubt.
We know that people are taking their lives. We know that people are going through stuff, and we're not afraid as an organization to try things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I said, you just don't know what they're going through. So you have to be able to provide something before they even, in order for them to even try it. The hard part is providing it and then having the patience to kind of sit back and say, okay, hopefully it's like fishing. Hopefully they will. Hopefully they will. Then you get one, then you get two or three. Next thing you know, you have five or six. And next thing you know, your budget's decreasing and going smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's a good thing, because that
Yeah.
means that people are using it, and people know that it's there to help.
Yeah.
I was interviewing somebody one time for a promotional position, and during the interview, um, this just goes back to show you just don't know what people are going through in that point in time. Like, I'm thinking about the times when I was preparing for a promotional interview. I was completely focused on that, and I was prepared, and I studied, and I did everything I needed to do. I practiced and had people quiz me, and that's where my mind was. Um, this individual that I was interviewing obviously was not in that place, because during the interview, maybe 10 minutes into the interview, um, he's starting to cry. And I've never dealt with that obviously in an interview before. I mean, am I supposed to deal with this in the middle of an interview? We were doing a promotion interview, and you're breaking down. And I started to talk to him, and he started to go into all the issues that he's having, and a bunch of stresses on his life, so much so to where he couldn't even focus on what he was doing right then. um, and it's a person like that you hope that will be able to bite on what we're trying to give out there, and then go out there and share the successes, and use that story and say, hey, you know what? I thought I was at the top of my game. I thought I was all ready for this interview. And then for whatever reason, I just wasn't at that place. And this helped me get to that place. And this helped me get to that place. And this helped me deal with this, or file this in my head, or whatever the case may be. But it's definitely something that you can't force. Absolutely. And you have to just hope that they share their stories.
Yeah, there's a couple things I like that you said. One is this idea of not knowing what people are going through. And I had a chief one time on this podcast. He said that he changed his mindset from just assuming that everyone was okay to assuming that everyone was hurting. And as soon as he did that, he was able to show up for people with more empathy, more presence,
Great, great view. Yeah.
I really liked that because how often do we go through the day and we're like, everyone's good, right? And then to your point,
Right.
you're like, well, no, maybe they're going through stuff in their personal life, their professional life, and we just
Yeah.
know. But if we can show up and understand that everyone is going through something, and there could be varying levels of something, it
Right.
doesn't always have to be like a huge mental crisis. It could be just, varying levels of stress.
Yeah.
And if we understand that everyone has stuff going on, then it allows us to show up in a better way that's supportive of that. And so I really liked that. And I tried to implement that in my day to day of having maybe a little bit more
Yeah.
awareness,
That is fantastic.
empathy. But the other thing is sharing our stories. And that is scary sometimes. It's scary to have that vulnerability to say, "Hey, I was struggling with this thing," like, and I'll use your example that you just said, if I were that individual to go out in front of my peers and be like, "Yeah, I broke down crying in an interview." And then I did this and now it helped me.
Right.
That initial like sharing of like, hey, this was really overwhelming for me, or this was, challenging, or this was really stressful is hard for people. But I think that it's a superpower. I think if we start to understand that, and I almost feel it, and this is my point of view, but I almost feel like it's my obligation or my responsibility to share those things with other people because I want people to be better than me. I want
Yeah.
people to learn from me. I want people to understand that they're not alone in feeling these things. And how can we help to elevate everybody through our shared experiences? And so I really
Yeah.
like that you said, then you like really, talked about sharing and
Yeah.
part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why we become cops is to help people, right? But we don't ever think about helping the guy to the left or right of us or the girl to the right or left of us. That's a great mentality is it's your obligation to share. I mean, that's what you care about the person to your left and right. You got to make sure that they're good too. And they're not going to jump all in unless they hear it from you sometimes, right? And that's, it may not work 100% of the time, but God bless it. I mean, if it works two times, that's better than the two times we had before that. So it's your obligation to share, but that's so hard to get them to buy into that. I think as a leader, you have to keep overemphasizing that again and again and again and again and again and again, and hope that eventually this it starts to erode that wall, and maybe there is more conversations about it and so on and so forth. And that's about where I'm at now, where I'm keeping the repetition going and repeating things over and over again, bringing the people in, and whether they need it or not, you're going to see their face and you're going to become familiar with them. And these are people that are trained in public safety and trained in the military and dealing with all the traumatic experiences that we deal with, and that's really important too. So the more I bring them here, the more they see people, the more they're apt to maybe, like I said, pull them aside one time. And then it's all it takes is that one time. And then as soon as the first person does it, second person, third person, and that's when I think we'll have success.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's all about reinforcement and eventually it becomes normal. And, I think to your point that maybe you don't get everybody. And maybe there's not a world where you do reach everybody. Maybe there is, maybe there is. I don't think we've reached there yet. I think that there's still some stigma, there's still some resistance to some of these things. But I think with the younger generation coming in, with the conversation being consistent and having that reinforcement and having those resources, those things become more normal, and they become more of the majority. But I think it's this idea that maybe someone doesn't need something today, but maybe in a week they do, maybe in a month
Yeah,
they do, maybe in 5 years they do. And when they do, we got them. We have a soft
exactly right.
landing for them.
Yeah.
You had said to me offline that you didn't think that EAP was enough. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you didn't think EAP was enough and why you then took the next steps to have people on site and have additional resources?
Yeah. So So I can't steal the idea, or I can't say that I came up with the idea, because in my previous agency, this is what we came up with, and it was EAP is good, right? A lot of those counselors are certified in many things, and they're dealing with somebody that may, want to commit suicide, or somebody that's having marriage problems or things like that. But they're not. Most of them aren't trained with what we see every day, and they're not trained with, a baby dying in your arms, and then going to a next call, and a grandmother just passed away, and the grandfather's sitting on the bed and can't deal with anything because she was his life. And then you go from that call to someone who just committed suicide and shot themselves in their head, and then it's just crazy, and it just adds up so fast that it really begins to take a toll. But the thing with the EAP is they're not necessarily trained to deal with that type of traumatic stuff.
Mm.
So, we had instances where we had, somebody that was able to come and talk to us. They were like, I went to go see an EAP counselor, or talk to them. And by the end of the conversation, they were in tears because of from what I saw at work during the day. And this officer is explaining to this person, their story, and the person that's supposed to be helping them is having some issues getting through this whole thing. And that's when we realize, we are different. It just is what it is. We are different. It's not necessarily good. It's not necessarily bad, but we have to have people that are trained specifically to cope, to help us deal with what we see every single day. And
Yeah.
that was the big thing. So when we started to go down that road, then we started to find out, what are the different qualifications for EAP? What are the different qualifications? And it's hard to find people that have a qualification and deal with first responders, deal with the military. There's not, I mean, you would think there'd be more of them out there, but there really isn't. You have to hunt and search for them. And when you find them, hold on to them, because there's not that many out there. But it does make a big difference when you have somebody sitting across from you, that you're not the first person that they've told about their crazy day that they've gone through. They've dealt with people in the military that have had, IEDs blow up in front of them, and had their best friends die in their arms. They come back. Now they're a police officer. They're seeing this and that. And somebody that's qualified to deal with that just makes it a whole lot better, a whole lot better. And there's more trust there between that individual and the counselor as well. We help people all day long, all night long. When we want to go talk to somebody, we're looking for them to help us, and
Yeah.
that's what we're looking for. And that's why it's hard.
And I'll tell you, you're not alone. I've had this conversation a lot, and I've even heard stories where, at the end of, maybe an EAP, they're like, you should leave the job, and so they were seeing people who reached out for help now thinking that they can no longer do the job anymore. And the
Yeah.
goal is like, how can we get you better? How can we get you moving forward in a positive way? Not how
Right.
can we, keep you there,
And
or
get you
how,
out.
yeah. And so
Absolutely.
you're not alone. And one of the things you said earlier was that, you guys put money into this, into, getting more resources, different resources. And then the budget was blown in 4 months. So a good and a bad problem to have, depending
Yeah.
on what the available funds are. But I think one of the questions, I always get, and I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this are kind of wondering, is how did you get the money for this? How did you budget for it? What were some of the things and strategies that you were able to implement so that this is a consistent resource that you can
Yeah.
maintain, and it's not something that you pay for once and then you can't afford, in the future?
Yeah. So, when we do our budgets, it's all public, and we have people come up and talk, and there's dialogue back and forth, kind of negotiations with your elected officials, all that good stuff. And I have a really good relationship with our elected officials. So on that part, I've been talking about this for months and months and months leading up to that. So first of all, I didn't surprise anybody. They knew I was coming with this. You get people that come up to the diocese, and they give their comments from the public, and 95% of them are absolutely for it. They want us to be healthy. They want to have resources for us to make sure that we live long to well after the job. And there are people that get up there and will say things like, you got to be careful of the feather bedding, the people that are taking advantage of it, and everything. And you kind of brought this up a little bit before, but if I'm helping 85% of my people, and 15% are gonna take advantage of it, I'm good with that. If I'm helping 50%, people, and I have some people that are taking advantage of it. I'm good with that too. It just that's just the way the numbers roll. But I was very lucky to have a commission that was very supportive of law enforcement, of public safety, and as I went up there to ask for it as part of my budget, like I said, they knew where I was coming from, and I was just honest with them. And I go back to what we're dealing with every day, and like you said, you just don't know what everybody's dealing with. And I'm looking up there at my commission as I'm requesting this, and I'm giving my little speech about how I think this is going to help us, and it's going to help retain us, it's going to make us healthier, and save lives and things like that. And I'm just looking around the room, and I'm just thinking to myself, I bet a lot of these people could use some help too. They may not see exactly what we see every day, but God bless it, they are dealing with some crazy stuff too. And I think just that mentality, knowing that we're not alone, there are other people out there, there's other professions across the entire stage that could use some stuff, could use some support and things like that. And it wasn't that hard to sell. It really wasn't. I mean, they were on board from the very beginning. Like I said, minus a few naysayers here and there, but they were on board. And I think they realize that it is very important, and that it extends our lives. It makes us more healthier. And it will help us do a better job, right? Because that's what they want. They want us to do the best job that we can possibly do. And I just keep reminding them that it's not just the legal training that we get, the DT training we get, the driving training, the firearms training. We invest so much in our employees training wise, but we don't necessarily invest in their body. We don't really, whether they're taking care of themselves, mind, body, soul, that whole type thing. And it was very easy to express that to my commission, to my elected people, and they were on board. I'm very lucky or I'm a great talker. I think I'm very lucky because I tend to talk in circles, but they definitely were on board, and I was extremely lucky.
Yeah, I had someone say one time, and it stuck with me. They said, what good is having, they're talking about a drone program, right? They're like, we have one of the best drone programs, right? They're like, what good is having a drone program if you don't have a drone pilot? And it was this idea of like people first, like we got to take care of the people first, because you can have all these things and all this training. And if you don't have anyone there and your people aren't, healthy,
Yeah,
and you said a couple of,
right.
you said retaining, so you said retention,
Mhm.
you said safety, and saving lives. Do you think that wellness equals that? Do you think that wellness equals retention? Do you think wellness equals safety, in the community and doing a better job? Do you think that wellness can save lives?
Oh, very much so. Absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, if you think about it, you know, you come to work and you're having a bad day at home for whatever reason, kids, money, husband, wife, whatever it may be. Um, and you're a trooper. You're still wanting to come to work and do your job, but your mind's not in the right place.
Mm.
And that's when mistakes happen, and they're not intentional. They're not something where I'm coming to work planning on getting a complaint today because I yelled at this person or I snapped at this person, or heaven forbid, I do something where I injure somebody, or something like that. And it's those types of things. The more healthy you are, mind, body, soul, you're going to be healthy at work. And the more healthy you are at work, the better cop you're going to be. The better cop you're going to be, the better job you're going to do. And it does go hand in hand. It's just like when you're sick and you have, a cold, and you come to work and you got that migraine, and you just don't want to be there. I don't want that police officer coming to my door, right? I don't want the police officer that doesn't want to be there that day because they're dealing with issues at home, and then trying to deal with my issues that I'm presenting to them. I want that person to come with a clean slate, a clear mind, um, and have that out to be able to talk to somebody if they need that help, to get their mind back on track so that they can do the best job that they can possibly do.
Yeah, I agree. And, I wanted to kind of circle back to what we were saying earlier because, the message and I think the million-dollar question that everyone is asking, and you said this earlier, we put it out there. It's kind of like fishing, we sit back and we hope people nibble on it, or we hope people will, bite. And I think the question is, how do we get people to want to take care of themselves? And you said this earlier of like looking at the people beside you. And I had a conversation earlier today that I thought was really interesting, and it was this idea of service. And you guys are very much in a profession of service, but I think that when we think of this, you think about serving the community. And it's this idea of how can we have conversations to where people want to, one, serve themselves, because you have to take care of yourself. And you
Yeah,
said this earlier, like if you're not taking care of yourself, how can you expect to be effective in taking care of
yeah,
other people? But then the second step was, okay, first serve yourself, then serve each other, and that's what you said, the people next to you,
yeah.
then serving the community. So how
Yeah.
can you serve yourself, serve each other, and then serve the community? And so how do we, especially the younger generation, maybe, and we were talking about this offline, like maybe there isn't a lot of foresight into the future. Maybe you're just trying to learn the job right now. Maybe you think you have a lot of time. And then, like we said earlier, we blink and 30
Gone.
years goes by
Yeah,
and like here we
yeah.
are and we have all these aches and pains. But uh, how do you think we get people to care about themselves and to take advantage of these things so that they can do everything that you just said, so that they can be safe, so that they can be well?
Well, I think first, like I said before, is that you have to keep preaching it over and over and over again. And um, you have to be not scared to share your stories, share other people's stories. And most importantly, it has to be sincere. We've all had that boss, we've all had that leader, whatever the case may be, that will get up there and talk a talk, but his mind's not there, or that's not what he's thinking, or he's looking for promotion, or whatever the case may be. The person that gets up there and just isn't very sincere. And I think that's probably the number one thing is you have to be absolutely sincere. You have to care about your people. Without our people, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. They're our most important, and I hate to use the word tool. They're not a tool. They're our most important resource that we possibly have. So we have to make them feel that way. I mean, you can make someone feel great. You can still hold them accountable. You can still do all that stuff. It's kind of like having a kid. You absolutely love your kid. You want your kid to succeed and do great things. When your kid messes up, you smack them in the back of the head. When your kid does good, you give them a high five. But you keep preaching things over and over again, and eventually, hopefully, they know where you're coming from. They don't have that wall to try to break down when they absolutely do need some kind of assistance. And also, too, the younger generation, I hate to use that word because that makes me sound really old, but the younger generation today is a lot different than my generation. You know, I think they are more apt to seek help and reach out and talk than maybe we were even able to do back then. Now these days it may be done on text, but nonetheless they're still able. I think they're a little more able and wanting for that help and accepting that it's not a big stigma that they have to get over. I don't think that's the same today. I just think that they have to feel that they're sincerely loved, that they're sincerely cared for, and that we're trying to do the absolute best that we can to keep them healthy. And I think if you continue that and preach that over and over again, I think that helps.
I very much believe that it's a partnership, and to your point, like how, as an organization, can you spread that message and how can there be sincerity and authenticity
Yeah,
and consistency with that message? And then it's also, the responsibility of the individual if they need help, if they need resources to take those steps, and
yeah,
be proactive with their own wellness too. And so I do think you're spot on with, hey, like it's a partnership and there has to be both, because an
yeah,
organization can have all of those things.
yeah,
But if someone isn't going to take those steps for themselves, then
yeah,
there's a disconnect there.
yeah,
I also
absolutely.
think that, it's the efforts that, and I'll say, I don't want to say your generation because then it does make you sound old, and that's not what I mean. But
Uh,
it's the efforts that are being taken today that I think are helping the younger generation to have the ability to reach for the resources, because they're coming into it and it's way more normal and talked about than when you were coming into it. I work with a lot of agencies that do pre-hire stuff, academy stuff, when they are transitioning, into their positions, they're talking about home wellness. Like that, this is something that's starting from ground zero, which was not something that happened when you entered into this profession. So
Not at all.
all of these efforts now, I think, are setting them up for future success. So I'm excited about the future. I think it's going to be really interesting to see,
Yeah.
how things progress and maybe how the use of technology is helpful. Like you said, maybe it's texting, maybe
Yeah.
it's virtual resources, but I think it's going to be exciting to see what the future looks like. But my final question for you, because I, want to be respectful of your time, but it is for kind of the younger men and women who are coming into this profession today. If you could go back and talk to your younger self, if you could rewind time with all of the knowledge that you have today, what words of wisdom would you share with the younger officer? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that has helped you along the way.
It's one thing that I didn't know I was doing back then, but I was doing it very unintentionally was my work-life balance. I preach that a lot at my organization now. You have to have that work-life balance. I remember when I first came up, that there was, you were a police officer, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There was no getting out of it. You ate, drank, sleep, everything you thought about what was the cop world. And for whatever reason, I started to kind of pull away from that. And I did sports outside. I played men's soccer for 20 years until my wife finally said, I'm not coming to the hospital to see you anymore because of all my injuries. I had to stop then because she was real supportive. However, that's what I did. I had a lot of things outside of work that kept me grounded, and I had friends that weren't necessarily police officers. You're around the other police officers all day long. You don't need to be around that 24/7. Doesn't mean you can't have some friends that aren't police officers, but that shouldn't be your entire world. There's a whole nother world out there that's not law enforcement that I think is helps keep you grounded, helps keep you sane, helps you see that the world is still good that you're trying to do things with out there. I remember when I was in the drug unit, the undercover drug unit, every house that I did a trash pull on, at the back at that time, there was drugs in the trash. And you just get to think after a while, damn, does every single person in this city does drugs? I'm pretty confident of that. It's just not that way though, right? It's the 10% of the community that you deal with 90% of the time. And it was the 10% I was dealing with 100% of the time. So when I got out of the unit, I remember I went back to patrol as a sergeant. I got promoted out of there. And I remember that's when you get back to the real job of dealing with the citizens and their grief and their needs and how can I help and things like that. So you have to sometimes break away from the police side of things. Whether it's working out, staying healthy, playing sports. I coached for a long time. And that's one thing I think that people don't do a good job of today. They think that you have to be 100% cop to be a good cop, and you don't. Enjoy your life, have a good time. I'm definitely at that point in my age now where I do love my job 100%, but I absolutely love my time off too. Because when I'm off, I turn my brain off, I put my phone away, and I veg. We go out and we travel all over the place and do all kinds of crazy things, but it's not police stuff 24/7. And I think that's crazy important. Um, and I think these days it's harder and harder and harder to get people to understand that. But at the same time, these are the same generation that play a lot of Xbox games and things like that. So maybe they will have that. But I wish I knew that earlier, although I was doing it unintentionally throughout my life, I think. So I was pretty fortunate um to do the things I was due to able to step away so I could keep my brain straight. And when it was Monday, I was ready to go back to work. I was rejuvenated, I was healthy, I was good to go, and let's hit the road. By Friday, I was ready to unplug and go out there and break another leg or tear another ACL. So that's what I would say is that you have to have that work-life balance. It's going to make for an extremely long career, but you have to be able to have that unplug
Thank you.
and
I
enjoy life.
think those are great words of wisdom, and I would argue that it might even make you better at what you do because now you are multifaceted. You
Totally right.
have rest and recovery, which is important. you have different perspectives of things, different ways of learning and growing yourself outside of the career, which then can apply to the career. So I think those are
Right.
great words of wisdom. Thank
Yeah.
you for your time.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate you coming on here and talking to me today. I thought that was really fun. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Of course.